was actually introduced to Isagenix, I think around 13 years ago now. One of my closest friends, best friends, Kelly Dickerhoof, came to me after a woman sat next to her on an airplane and told her about Isagenix, Janie Elo. And Kelly came to me at a Memorial Day barbecue here in Spokane and said, "Oh my gosh, Laura, you need to cleanse with me. We're going to get our energy back." And I, as a military spouse at the time, and I do have celiac disease, so I felt like I knew a lot about nutrition. I was very closed-minded to shakes, to cleanses, to any of that. And so I just said, no, thank you. Not for me. I hope it helps you. And just kind of watched Kelly for 3 years. And I just want to give a huge shout out to Kelly because she went forward and moved on and paved the way for so many of us without her closest friends doing it with her, without so many in her family understanding. She didn't care. She saw the vision of what Isagenix could be. She knew she felt good, and she just blazed a trail. So for that, I'm forever grateful. Kelly, you know how much I love you, but thank you for doing that. And I just want to remind you, you don't know who's watching. You don't know who's sitting there waiting for you to go first and how long it's going to take them to say yes. But because Kelly went forward and changed her life and changed so many lives around us and helped her husband come home from corporate America and all those things, I was watching the whole time through social media. I moved away from Spokane. My husband was an active duty Marine, and I ended up having 3 babies in 3 years. And I had just turned 30 and was at a place where I wasn't loving the body I was in. I had very little energy. I was carrying extra baby weight, and we were on a single military income at the time. I was in the process of getting my master's to become a high school health teacher and volleyball coach. I had taught myself how to sew. I'd opened up an Etsy sewing business. I'd been an aerobic instructor at one point. I was the coupon lady that was at Rite Aid with my binder of coupons. I knew all the recycling centers to get the extra coupon clippings. I was doing all these things. Meanwhile, Isagenix was literally right in front of me. Kelly was going at it, changing lives, whatever. And I was just so closed-minded. I had seen people do network marketing in a very small way, more in a direct selling way in the military environment, military spouse environment. And I was naive. I didn't know what I didn't know. So March 28th, 2014, so March 28th of this year will actually be my 10-year Isagenix anniversary. I called Kelly after almost joining a couple other network marketing companies, but I was ready for a change. And I just said, whatever you've done, I'm in. And I think her jaw probably hit the floor because I was not somebody who had ever given her any indication that I would ever join her. I was very happy for her. And I was actually the friend that had given her referrals a few times, but I had never shown any indication that I would want to do this. And so she was actually flying down to a Top Achievers event in Southern California. So I picked her up at the airport. I remember going to lunch with her and just bawling and just crying because I was so tired of being in debt. I was so, John was getting ready to deploy. He was about to deploy. I was so nervous about what that would look like. And I so desperately wanted to feel better and change my life. And one of the first things she did was she handed me the map to Crystal Executive. Obviously, I put the products in my body. I did start with a value pack, and still to this day, a Happy 30 Day, which we'll talk about later, is one of my favorite things to recommend. So I did lose about 12 pounds in a short amount of time that it really made an impact on me. I felt good. People noticed around me. But I was going for Crystal Executive. And then she convinced me to go to an Isagenix university in Seattle. And I was a manager at the time. I was a Crystal manager at the time. And I remember sitting back and seeing probably so many of you here walking across stage. Yes, Shannon, I was there with you. Shannon Fisher. I remember hearing you speak at that event. Actually, Shannon, it was very impactful. But I remember going to that event, and thinking, if all these people, all demographics, all ages, all walks of life were walking across that stage for recognition, and I thought, oh my gosh, if all of these people can reach these amazing life-changing ranks in this company, become Isagenix legacy members, why couldn't I? And so when Lisa speaks to you and says events are everything, they truly are. It opens up your eyes in a whole new way as to what can happen in this company, and you feel equipped and ready to go. And so I went home and became a Crystal Executive in less than 2 months, and then John deployed. And I had 3 babies at home. And Lisa, were you going to ask a question?
So John deploys and you have 3 babies at home. Now, whether people have 3 babies at home or they have another business or they're taking care of an elderly parent, the hardest part for everyone is figuring out a schedule when we have so much autonomy and being accountable to ourselves. I'm sure, Laura, anyone who has kids, you had to have been exhausted. No matter how amazing our products are, 3 little ones by yourself, you're really a single parent for that time. How did you do this? Where did you network? What did you say? How noisy and messy was your house? Did you travel to go do meetings? Like, we want you to take us through that moment in time, because so many of us are starting over. Even if we have a team, we're starting again. How did you navigate through this time?
Yes. So it was step by step and very goal focused for me. So I would be like, what's the next step in my business? What's the next goal? What's the next rank? What's the next whatever? And then I would just do whatever I needed to do to get there. So I did so many things. I had popsicle play dates in the park that I would just invite moms to. I found local Facebook groups on the military base that I would post in. I had 6 launch party tastings that 0 people showed up to. 0. And I remember, I don't know, this brings me to tears almost. I would set up everything. I even paid to rent a community center on base. I had John come home and watch everybody. And I sat there and no one came in the door. And I had everything set up. And so I would ask yourself, when's the last time you put yourself out there to where you may fail? And I failed a lot. But every time I failed, I chose to fail forward. And I was blessed to have a supportive partner. When I would call him in tears, he'd say, stay there and work. I don't care. Use that time to figure out what you're going to do to invite to the next event. And so that's what I just did. And I'll never forget, I had a Christmas party before we moved from San Diego, and I probably had almost 50 people at my house in the San Diego area. And going from having all of those launch parties when it was so hard to do, and it was such a stressful season of my life, I could have backed out. I could have said no. I could have said, I don't have the time. I don't have the resources, to seeing the movement that came from me, the perseverance. It was awesome. So it just propelled me forward. I had to fly in childcare to fly out to University of Action in Minnesota. And it was like 2 weeks before John deployed. And I actually had a leader cancel on me because she couldn't leave her kids. That was what she told me. And the blood boiled in my heart. And I had a leadership lesson moment there that I decided and went to the event anyway. And I ended up having 2 people with me. And that after that leader backed out, and I thought, you can't come to this event that's not far for you to get to. You weren't willing to leave your kids. Well, I'm flying across the country, paying childcare to fly in, and sometimes it comes back to who is willing to sacrifice the most, who is willing to give up some things at the front to learn, to go to really become a professional network marketer. That's when the magic happens. Those sacrifices can lead to so much good. And so that was me. I would often drive around in my minivan with movies playing while I did calls. So my kids were preoccupied and asleep because I didn't have childcare at that time. I got a membership at a YMCA because I realized how important it was to move my body and to get my head in a good mental place where there was 2 hours of free childcare. So I would work out for an hour, and then I found a table right outside the childcare that I would work for another hour. I had my kids on really great schedules. I made sure that was a priority so that I worked in the morning before they wake up, in the afternoon when they were napping, and at night after they were in bed. But I would even invite moms over for a play date. I was suggesting this to a friend this weekend who has 2 small boys and she doesn't have any childcare. I invited moms over for play dates and would feed them shakes while our kids would play. So much magic happened around my kitchen table. I didn't have an office space to work at in our home. The kitchen table was it. The minivan was it. But I just pivoted and wanted this so badly that we just made it work. I don't know if is that helpful?
Laura, I love
learning the compensation plan. because how could I look at myself in the mirror knowing all of that money was on the table that could change everything for my family, knowing that, and then just giving up? What example would that be to my kids? What would that do for my husband who was serving our country, potentially giving his life for our country, sacrificing so much? And then I'm uncomfortable because I fear failure, or I'm worried about what people will think. So it was honestly making that vision board and looking at my family. Everything I did was for my family. Every trip was for, I remember winning President's Quest. It was a cruise where 8 people in the company could go. And every night I would stare at the contest and promotions page at the flyer and imagine showing my husband all these ancient cannons all over Europe, because he was a artilleryman in the military, and I knew he'd love that. We'd never gotten to travel. Every year we'd start an envelope system to try to get a trip to Hawaii or something, and we'd always have to use the cash for a new stroller, or something would happen to a car or something else. So when you put those that are most important to you behind your why, you won't give up. How could you? There's so much money sitting here on the table that it's like, what could you do with that? What would your kids do with that? What legacy could that leave? Where could you give? Who could you give that money to? And if you think like that, guess what? It becomes not about you, but who you get to bless, who you get to serve, and who will get to ultimately benefit from this run in Isagenix. And that's what kept me going. It was chaotic at the time. It was like a messy excitement. I was so excited when I started. You guys, this compensation plan changed our lives, and I would see the cash and I would be like, oh my gosh, coming from working an exercise class and earning, I don't even know how much after taxes were taken, maybe like $10, to actually being able to earn hundreds and thousands of dollars in bonuses was so much. So I was just ignorance on fire and excited. My house was messy. My car was messy. I didn't know what to necessarily dress like. I had to teach myself how to look a little bit better. I was, having spit up all over my shirt and just kind of in baggy clothes because I was just surviving, to then presenting myself in a more professional and beautiful way, which was something that was important to me. Elevating my look, elevating my brand, elevating our life. I had to learn all that. So it was just, I learned as I went. There was no pressure to be somebody I wasn't, but I wanted to just continue to get better in all aspects. But it was messy, and it's still messy. I have 5 kids. I still fit things in the pockets. There are still things I have to miss sometimes, but the blessings that have come from all of that are still outweighing everything. And so it's just being ready to pivot and being okay. We had to pivot a lot, even